Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Spatial Data Science with Notebooks and ArcGIS Pro workshop. My name is Alberto Nieto. I'm a product engineer in the spatial statistics team, and I'm joined by my colleague, Danny.
I'm Danny McVeigh. I'm a product engineer on the spatial data science team focused on Python in ArcGIS Pro.
And we're going to have a fun workshop. Whether you're a brand new user that's never used notebooks before, we're going to share examples that can help you get started. Or perhaps you're a seasoned user that already uses notebooks to prototype workflows. We're going to talk about some tips to get you going there. Notebooks are an important part of what makes ArcGIS Pro a great spatial data science workstation. So let's get started. ArcGIS Pro has really matured into this robust spatial data science workstation. And along with this, we've also seen this rise in the use of Jupyter notebooks across data science organizations and individuals. Anytime you look for examples, it's likely that you're going to come across a Jupyter notebook to get you started. So I often hear the questions from folks like anyone in the public: which one should I use? Which one is better? Should I stick to notebooks? Should I stick to ArcGIS Pro? And that often leads to these kind of non-answers about why not use both or the right tool for the right job, which is indeed what should happen. But what I'm happy to talk about today is actually that we don't need to choose one or the other. In fact, we can choose both because as it turns out, we have now notebooks within ArcGIS Pro, which brings everything together and makes this really quite a robust spatial data science workstation that is meant to handle a lot of the needs. So with notebooks in ArcGIS Pro, we have this ability now to benefit from the rich Python ecosystem, but in a way that is really conducive to prototyping, to documentation, to sharing, to learning, because of the things that a Jupyter notebook brings. So I also want to make reference to these building blocks that we often talk about in our workshops regarding spatial data science, all the way from data engineering to sharing and collaboration. And I want to illustrate just briefly how notebooks in ArcGIS Pro can really be a helpful part of this for each one of these. For instance, with data engineering, Pandas has become this really powerful package to manipulate data, to clean it up, to process it ahead of the rest of the steps. And there's examples that take you through that. Additionally, with visualization and exploration, if you're just sticking to a notebook, you're not gonna really benefit from these really robust capabilities that ArcGIS Pro has to visualize your data, to create maps and consider cartography. And also with respect to charts and the ability to visualize uh, attribute data. ArcGIS Pro has these well thought out charting capabilities that if you resort to only charting within Python, you're reinventing the wheel from scratch very often. So there's this benefit here to use a GUI when it suits the need and script when it suits the need. Now, the bulk of this is really about spatial analysis, right? And ArcGIS Pro is just complete with a suite of spatial data science tools, from spatial statistics to network analysts to business analysts and so on. The tools that are meant to drive spatial analysis generally can be found within ArcGIS Pro. And once again, if you stick to a notebook, you're not really tapping into that entire ecosystem. So having it within this is really conducive to better analysis. Finally, with big data, we also have the Python ecosystems packages that are designed for big data workflows, thinking of Spark and others. Additionally, in the ArcGIS Pro side, we have a variety of geoanalytics desktop tools that are meant to work with that type of data. Now, moving to modeling and scripting, it's all about that. So I don't need to say much more other than notebooks are meant to be where you script. So it makes it a more compelling scripting environment within Pro. So it's an enhancement for Pro, certainly. And finally, sharing and collaboration. I mentioned that anywhere you look, you're probably going to find notebook examples if you're looking for data science work. And um, it's really exciting to see that a notebook now comes with an ArcGIS Pro package. So if I send the Pro package to my colleague, I can have a notebook that annotates that workflow in addition to the geoprocessing history and the maps that may be part of that package. So it really rounds out this software. Now, that's a lot to cover. So today's workshop is really going to just focus on three things. The first one is if you're a new user, if you're brand new to Python, or if you're brand new to analysis and data science, notebooks are really useful to learn spatial data science workflows. So you can take a notebook for a spin that someone else wrote, read the markdown that usually covers the context for that analysis or for that workflow, and then look at the code and learn from the code. And in fact, that's how many of us probably learn Python and get started with Python, by looking at other notebooks. Another takeaway from today's workshop that I hope you take out is that if you're an experienced user, and let's say that you like PyCharm or some other development environment, perhaps not PyScripter because no one likes that, but PyCharm. Uh, well, notebooks can be really compelling for you, even as an experienced developer. The ability for cells to be self-contained pieces of code that you can go back to and execute out of order is critical to prototyping in my perspective. So even if you love PyCharm, you may not be developing a module, an entire Python module within a notebook, but a notebook certainly has a role to play when you're prototyping a brand new workflow. And finally, the third item I want you to take away from today's workshop is that notebooks are just extremely well suited for sharing and collaboration and for reproducibility. So the idea that someone can take this notebook, re-execute it, and expect the same results, some contingencies allowed, has become commonplace, right? And I myself have learned so much from other notebooks that people have shared with me. So I hope you have a chance to do that with us. So with that, I'd like to let Danny take you out for a spin to show how we can start learning from notebooks that may already exist out there.
This is a tutorial I found on GitHub. It consists of 4 Jupyter notebooks and a data folder, which contains tables used and referred to in the notebooks. How could I get this into ArcGIS Pro? One option would be to copy them and the data folder into a project directory. Another, I think, easier way is to create an ArcGIS Pro project in this folder. If I uncheck create a new folder for this project, it will create the project directly inside this folder. Now I can easily see that the notebooks are a part of the project. If I right-click to open one, I can run cells just like I would outside of ArcGIS Pro. Another great option to get started is with Esri provided samples. This is an example of a hosted notebook available in ArcGIS Online. This one does some site selection for health clinics. I could download the notebook file and add it to my existing project, or right here in Pro, I can search for site selection health clinics. The notebook comes up. I can right-click to download. The default location is my project's home folder. Save. Now I have a copy of this Esri notebook that I can run locally here in ArcGIS Pro. It should run similarly to the way it does in online. You can see an example of the map widget right here. But I can also use the data added to this notebook directly in ArcGIS Pro in an ArcGIS Pro map. Let's see what that looks like. In this cell, we create a spatial data frame for the patient locations layer from ArcGIS Online. I can add another cell here and see what that patient locations layer looks like as a file geodatabase feature class here in this project. The toFeatureClass method is built into the ArcGIS Python API. Now that that's run, I have this patient locations feature class in my default geodatabase, which I can now add to an ArcGIS Pro map. And we can see that it looks similar to the one we saw in the Python API map widget directly in the notebook. From here, and the reason you would want to do this is to get the layer in the table of contents so that we can reference it by layer name. Let's say after this, I wanted to do some analysis. Let's just sample the buffer tool, arcpy.buffer analysis. I don't know the name of the tool, but I don't know the parameters memorized. Let me show you a trick here. With Jupyter Notebooks, I can access the help by using a question mark. So the first parameter is in features. I can refer to our layer that we created, patient locations. Second parameter is out feature class. All that needs is a name. And the third is buffer distance. So I'll just type in 25 miles. Control Enter. This geoprocessing tool runs locally from the notebook, and the output is automatically added to the map. So that's how easy it is to download, add to Pro, and modify and add on to existing notebooks. You don't always have to start from scratch. We can take advantage of others' work that has been done previously and modify or extend it.
Great, thank you, Danny. So this next demonstration is all about using a notebook to prototype an analysis, which is really important because no analysis is straightforward typically. There's never this straight path from beginning to end. It's always this messy iterative process where you test and fail. And it's really important to have a workbench that can help you document your successes and your failures, more importantly. So a notebook within ArcGIS Pro makes a lot of sense for that. Let's take it away. So with this example, we're going to take a look at data for the 2020 presidential election in the United States. Particularly in Georgia, we would like to evaluate how the difference in voter turnout between the 2020 election and the 2016 election turned out. So for each county, if it's in green, it had a higher voter turnout in the most recent election. If it's in purple, it had a lower voter turnout in the most recent election. And we can use a chart here to visualize that and select maybe some of the counties that had the highest value. We can see that maybe the county with the highest increase had about 26% higher voter turnout. And that actually happens to be around Savannah. But then the counties with the lowest, actually most counties seem to be pretty good in terms of voter turnout in the most recent election. And what we'd like to do here is use a notebook to prototype an analysis. The idea is that this map is quite subjective. I can change the symbology and make whatever story I want to tell. So we want to run some statistical tools, some spatial stats tools essentially to determine if these regions that did have increased voter turnout indeed are better than random. So we have a notebook here, pretty straightforward, doesn't have too much already. I do have a few setup cells. The setup cells just import some packages such as pandas, operating system, ArcGIS API for Python, and ArcPy so that I can use all of the geoprocessing tools in ArcGIS Pro. I also have a reference to the Pro project and to the file geodatabase, as well as just setting up my default geodatabase and the workspace. So after I do this, I also want to make reference to a few layers here. We have a layer for voter turnout in the entire country and the one just for Georgia. That's it. The rest we're going to write together. So what I want to do is actually start with some Markdown. We're going to do some hotspot analysis. And we're going to say testing because we're not sure if we're going to be happy with the results. And something that you could do to start with is you could write ArcPy. I happen to know that spatial statistics is in the stats menu there. And then from here, we can do tab to see all the available tools. And I happen to know that we want to do an optimized hotspot analysis. From there, if you don't happen to know the parameters, obviously consult the documentation, but from the notebook, you can also add a question mark so that you can get the tool signature. Pretty straightforward. And from there, then we can start filling in the inputs. So I know that we want Georgia voter turnout as the input layer. We want to call the output, let's say voter turnout diff Georgia hotspots. And then finally, we need an analysis field. That analysis field is going to be called voter turnout diff. So it's basically this part without the caps. So voter turnout diff. And let's go ahead and run this. And while this runs, I want to write a little bit of markdown here right above it and just explain. So this test is optimized hotspot analysis, which identifies the neighborhood automatically. That's good and bad. It's good because we don't have to worry about it, but it's bad because we do have to worry about it after we run it once. So this is the result. It looks pretty nice. It starts to quantify some of those patterns that we were seeing. However, you really need to pay attention to the messages of the tool and to what the analysis does. With optimized hotspot analysis, the sequence is that we're testing for a null hypothesis that the distribution of those values is random, that there's no, if you see any high value, it's actually just due to random chance or so on. So if something is a hotspot, then there's a rejection of that null hypothesis. You basically have a neighborhood there of counties whose properties are statistically significant. They have really high values or really low values compared to the entire state. And if we look at the messages, what I'm looking for is what is that neighborhood? Because the neighborhood is what matters with hotspot analysis. So the neighborhood is highlighted here. The optimal fixed distance band, defining the neighborhood, is based on the average distance to 7 nearest neighbors, which is about 59,000 meters, basically about 60 kilometers. And what I want to do is I want to get a sense of how much that is. If I click this, we're already set up to measure distance in kilometers. Let's say that we're looking at Savannah. I want to see how far away would I have to go to find other neighboring counties in 60 kilometers. And it's pretty good, although some counties are going to get more neighbors than others. But the counties are pretty evenly sized, so it's not too bad. That being said, I do want to continue testing. I think I want to have another hotspot analysis result to just reinforce what we're seeing here. So to do that, something you can do is basically run the tool manually through the GUI. That's not bad at all. For instance, I know that hotspot analysis or GI star happens to have a parameter to conceptualize spatial neighbors or spatial relationships rather, using k nearest neighbors rather than a hard distance like 60 kilometers. And then you can say how many neighbors does each county need to have for this analysis. So I've run that already. I'm going to copy that Python command and paste that Python command here. And also I want to write a little bit of markdown here once again. So the second test uses a specified neighborhood for nearest neighbors. And now that we've written that, then we can continue on to the next step. But before we do too much else, I do want to interpret the results that we've seen so far. We've run hotspot analysis, optimized, meaning that the tool finds what the neighborhood should be, and it found roughly 60 kilometers. We've run hotspot analysis, defining a neighborhood of 8 nearest neighbors, and let's take a look at the differences. Now, in a notebook alone, you probably would have to plot the differences and try to go up and down and reinvent the wheel visualizing this data. Because it's in Pro, it's actually rather easy to compare those differences. In fact, that's one of the strengths of Pro, right? So we can use something like a swipe tool to just quickly compare the layer above to the layer below. No need to write a swipe tool from scratch. And the results are rather subtle, right? There's this northern part of Atlanta that comes back as a hotspot in both results. And To me, having it with 8 nearest neighbors might be a little bit more defined. It kind of builds confidence that that's really the region that experienced the increase in voter turnout and something that should be studied perhaps. Same with cold spots. If the southern parts of Georgia, you get a little bit more definition on exactly what parts of Georgia perhaps had lower voter turnout. So something else that you might want to do in companion to hotspot analysis is cluster outlier analysis. And by the same measure, you can do the same thing we've done with hotspot analysis. We can set up a routine here to do, let's do Markdown here, cluster outlier analysis. And we can call the tool from the Python signature or just visit our history, copy paste the Python command. Because we're in ArcGIS Pro, it's rather easy to do that and straightforward. I do want to do, I want to make sure that I have the right layer as an input. Voter turnout diff is our field. And then our output is going to be called clusters and outliers. Yeah, that's good. And I do want the k nearest neighbors to be preserved. So we want k nearest neighbors of 4. So let's go ahead and run that. Now, cluster and outlier analysis, if you're not familiar with it, it's really similar to hotspot analysis, but it gives you a little bit more detail within hotspots and cold spots. You might find that there's a county that within a hotspot neighborhood may be actually significantly low. So it would be a county that has really low voter turnout in an area that has high voter turnout. And we have the results here actually. We see, in fact, that the county containing Athens, Georgia seem to be a low-high outlier, meaning that it's really low for a neighborhood of really high counties with respect to increased voter turnout. So that to me is rather interesting. The other part about this that I find interesting is to the south near Albany, there's these counties that come back with higher or increase in voter turnout participation from one election to the next, even though they're in this region that has lower voter turnout. So those outliers are fascinating because in this region, I wonder what did they do right to have increased voter turnout there, and what did Athens perhaps do wrong, or what characteristic of that county led it to have lower voter turnout, even if the immediate vicinity was pretty strong. And one quick guess is that the University of Georgia, who I don't support football-wise, but I have a lot of great friends there. They probably didn't go out to vote. College towns sometimes have their own peculiar differences from the rest of the counties. A quick guess, right? So that's a guess that you might write here, as you may take a screenshot here. For instance, you could copy paste this image right underneath your results. And then state something along the lines of University of Georgia letting us all down again, smiley face. Now with that, we have a prototyping notebook, and obviously it's not final. It's something that is just to show an example of things you could do, and I'm sure you have plenty of examples yourself of using notebooks, but I just want to showcase that within a ArcGIS Pro project, it really shines as an analysis tool. So it's great to have it here. Now for the next example, we're going to take it back to Danny, who's going to share a really interesting example of sharing. Basically taking this notebook, perhaps the notebook that we just prototyped, or perhaps the notebook that we used earlier to learn some Python, and give it to someone else so that they can do something with it or reproduce the results. So with that, Danny, take it away.
For some, the benefit of knowing Python and how to use notebooks is sharing your work with others. The good news is, as project items, notebooks are included in project packages. So let me show you what that looks like with the notebook I was using previously. Share as project package. Now, with the packaged version of the notebook open, the cells that I changed are still modified, and you can see the previous output had been using the default geodatabase in the project I created. But now the input and output data has been copied to a package directory. But because I used the string name of for the input data and the output feature class, when I rerun this, you should see the output change from the default geodatabase of my previous project to the default geodatabase of my open package. See what that looks like. So there it is. This notebook and data are both portable. If you put this on another machine, you could do the same thing, and the cells would run without error. What about sharing code in Notebook with others who are experienced with Python but not with notebooks? They might not want a notebook, but they still might want to use your code. You can easily export the notebook to a .py file using nbconvert. The command for that to run in the notebook to script, and the path to the notebook, and like that. So when run like this, the notebook will be converted and put in the same directory. Let's give that a shot. So the Python file includes only the code cells, not the output. So running a .py file like this would be the same as running all the cells in your notebook. All right, now let's go over some of the resources that exist to help you forward with notebooks in Pro. First, I want to highlight this blog post, which is a tutorial and a lot of frequently asked questions. It was posted on GeoNet, so you can comment there, and it's going to be updated as ArcGIS Pro changes. Next, let's talk about Learn Lessons. There are 6 new Learn lessons focused on ArcGIS Notebooks. A lot of the skills that you learn through these can apply to ArcGIS Pro, including number 5 here talks about using ArcPy. That does it for us. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a clear understanding of where notebooks fit in ArcGIS Pro as a data science workstation. And we look forward to answering your questions. Thanks.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed that session. Danny and I are here live from our bedrooms or living rooms or wherever we're at. Hopefully you're doing safe or you're staying safe these days and enjoying the conference. We do have a Q&A session. We're gonna go through some of the questions that you've posted. You're welcome to keep adding questions and we'll try to address as many as we can during this Q&A segment. And we do have quite a bit of time to actually tackle some questions, so feel free to post some information there. So let's get started. And going through the list of questions, we have one question by Raphael that was upvoted 4 times, so it makes it to the top. Hello, could you tell me please, when is the best scenario for choosing notebooks rather than the Python window? Danny, would you want to get started and I'll chime in as well?
Sure. Good point, though, in this question, that notebooks are not replacing the Python window. They supplement existing ArcGIS Pro Python functionality. If you look on the analysis ribbon, the Python button now by default opens up a notebook, but you can also open up the Python window. If you're unfamiliar with notebooks, besides what you just saw in our presentation, the biggest difference between like a console view and the notebook is that you're saving a document. So you can run the same code in both places. If you just want to run one geoprocessing tool, ArcPy whatever, feel free to use the Python window or a notebook, but your notebook work can persist in a file, just like a .py file, but in a more dynamic way, because notebooks have markdown cells also. There are handy keyboard shortcuts and more functionality for rich output compared to the Python window, but both of these approaches tie in well with ArcGIS Pro in that, for example, analysis results are added to the active map. So I would say if you're feeling forced to choose, try both, and you'll see the strengths and weaknesses hopefully right away through practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, you answered it so well that I don't know how much more can I add. I think I just want to echo what you said. Try it, right? Try both, and you'll find your own flavor that you prefer for different workflows. And anything we think we might prescribe might not apply to you. So while that's a bit of a cop-out answer, I think it's the most accurate one. Just try both. It doesn't replace it. I think it's just a supplement to how you might write Python code.
Yeah.
The one thing maybe I can add, if you didn't already cover it, is a lot of examples, a lot of GitHub repositories that you might come across include notebooks, right? So a lot of what you learn about these days in academia or in classes or in hackathons, whatever you might face, people are embracing notebooks, and there's a lot of content there to learn from. So for that reason, I think notebooks have really come to be a very popular tool. And for that, I think in the case when you're sharing with others, as Danny briefly covered, I think that's when they really shine. A Python window might not be the best way to share with someone else. All right.
Which brings us to our next question about sharing.
Yeah, I'm gonna mark that one as answered just to keep track. And we're talking about Jim Way's question, right?
Yeah.
Cool, let me highlight that one. Looking at Danny's different ways to share notebooks, I wonder if these ArcGIS Pro notebooks are something that can be shared via ArcGIS Online or easily uploaded to GitHub. Danny, what? Yeah.
Yes and no. We don't yet have sharing capabilities directly from ArcGIS Pro to ArcGIS Online or Portal. There are ArcGIS notebooks available in Portal and Online. If you have those, you can actually, as I demonstrated in the video briefly, you can download those to Pro, but it's only a one-way street so far. We're working on that to making sure that those two experiences are tied together. But since you have the Jupyter Notebook file, the Ipnb file associated with your project in Pro, you can take that file directly and publish it as an item, as a notebook item in ArcGIS Online or Portal, if you have that capability, or upload to GitHub. It's your notebook file, just like Jupyter Notebooks exist on as a standalone Python functionality. So it's yes and no. We understand that that's a desirable experience to share with others that way, but right now our story is a little incomplete. That's the missing piece that we're working on in future releases, hopefully.
Yeah, good to hear you're working on it and it's coming down the roadmap.
Yeah, certainly that.
Marking that one as answered then. The next question is from Anonymous. Can you integrate dynamic elements like IPy widgets to create interactive actions with the map from the notebook running alongside it? And I can chime in if I can presume to. Yes, you can. I like IPy widgets to test what might eventually be a parameter in a geoprocessing tool. So you can definitely import IPy widgets and write the logic that may make sense for your notebook. And in fact, there was another workshop during this conference where we used it to sort of explain how notebooks are really useful as a prototyping tool for geoprocessing tools, in my opinion. But Danny, what would you say in addition to that, if anything?
A good part of that question is interactive actions with the map from the notebook running alongside it. Currently, the notebook runs the same Python, using the same Python kernel as the Python window, and it's linked to the open map that you have in Pro. But you can't really use the notebook to like drive the map in Pro. I've tried some of this myself. Like if I pulled up a IPyWidget slider and tried to use it to control the size of a buffer, for example. Seems like an interesting, neat use case for those interactive tools that you can spin up in the notebook. But right now, that kind of functionality doesn't work. In general, widgets are supported in notebooks in Pro. Notebooks in Pro should work like notebooks outside of Pro, but not all widgets are supported in Pro. And for details on that, you can check out the GeoNet blog post that we have. Maybe I'll put that link in the QA somehow.
Yeah, as an announcement, that might work too.
Okay.
No, that's a great answer too. Marking that as resolved. The next question is, slides are kind of blurry. Not a question, but an important note nonetheless. So we're definitely taking that feedback, and we'll work with our partners here for the conference to hopefully improve on that. There is a little gear setting that presumably can be used to increase your default resolution, but even at 720p, some of that Python code was a bit hard to see. So we're learning how to do that better, and we'll try to improve for the next conference. The next question, it is from Anonymous, but it says, I came in late. How do you load the notebook interface in Pro? Danny, why don't you take a stab at that one?
Yeah, good question. It might not be there right when you start ArcGIS Pro. You can click Python from the analysis ribbon, or I think the default ribbon, usually when you open up ArcGIS Pro, is the insert ribbon. You can insert a new notebook from there. Or as we demonstrated, if you already have Jupyter notebooks you're working with on your machine, you could make a folder connection to the directory that contains those and double click on an existing notebook to just open it up in Pro, or right click on it to make it a member of your project notebooks. So just like everything else in Esri products, there's 10 different ways to do it. We hope it's intuitive, and once you look for it, you won't be able to unsee it.
All right. Let's move over to the next one. If I save my notebook within the project's home directory or a subdirectory thereof, then move the project directory elsewhere, will ArcGIS Pro be able to locate the notebook using relative paths? Excellent question.
Yeah. Yes. Short answer is yes. Like other file-based project items, by default, they're stored with a relative path, so that Ipnb file in a home directory should appear in the catalog pane or catalog view in Pro, kind of as you expect. If you have any trouble with that, or you feel like you're losing connection to notebooks as Pro project items, definitely let us know either on GeoNet or the early adopter community, or by logging a support ticket. Because if you're having any trouble with that, that sounds like a bug.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Danny. So the next question, can you share the links at the end of the presentation? And yes, there was another person that actually was quite helpful, and they noted that the supplemental files section under this video, probably down there, has the PDF of our slides, and the last slide there should have the links that are appropriate. And we might add a few additional links as we continue answering some questions, but that PDF should have what you're asking for there.
Yeah.
All right. Steve asks, when sharing a notebook in a Pro project that imports a Python package that is not installed by default, will the Jupyter Notebook Python run on another person's machine, or do they need to install the package on their local machine? Great question. So Danny.
Yeah, they do need to install those packages. Some organizations are able to distribute a Conda environment that's customized to all users. So imagine you import some magic custom module or something really specific from Conda, and your notebook uses it. Maybe you have deep learning tools installed for ArcGIS Pro, but not everyone in your organization does. The notebook will come onto their machine as is, and you'll just get an import error unless you've installed the correct packages. This is a general Python conundrum, I guess. It's always been a problem sharing .py files. This isn't just notebooks. And as part of our incomplete sharing story, the notebook dependencies are not considered at all currently. So just like you would share a .py file and it might not run on someone else's machine because they didn't install the dependencies, running every cell in a notebook that you received from someone else who has done some customization to their Python environment, the notebook might not run. And hopefully the errors are clear enough. That's usually pretty good on a Python traceback. It'll tell you no module found, and you'll be able to tell right away, oh, it just looks like I'm missing the dependencies because the subject matter expert at my organization did some heavy customization. Definitely something to keep in mind, Steve. Great question. They just need to install it. Yeah, reach out to us on GeoNet about best practices for installing custom modules and Python packages that are not default at an organizational level. That's definitely a current area of interest of a lot of our power users.
Yeah, great answer. I may actually add something to that question if you don't mind, Danny. So
yeah.
With notebooks, using magic commands like conda install is common when you download a notebook. That's something we can do in notebooks in Pro, right? And while it's not necessarily the complete solution to any package that may be missing, that could be more. That's something that you could do in a notebook versus just a standalone Python file or a Python window, right?
Yeah, you can run !conda install whatever or change a version. The person sharing the notebook would have to know that ahead of time, but that might be the situation in your organization where you understand that some of the computers have this installed and most of them don't. So then when you share that notebook, maybe you have a cell that says run this if you don't think you have such and such module yet. Yeah, great idea. That certainly smooths things over.
I didn't learn about magic commands until years into using Python or using Jupyter Notebooks. So definitely, if you haven't looked at magic commands, do a quick Google search and go down that rabbit hole. All right. DBJ asks, is there any way to save notebooks by relative path to shared drives instead of just lettered drive names? And they provide an example there.
No. Current technical limitation due to the way ArcGIS Pro starts its own sort of notebook server on your machine. When you use Jupyter Notebook in the default way, the only option I think is on your C drive. And when you create a new notebook from the Jupyter Notebook browser, it just decides the folder location. So we kind of had to do the same thing in Pro. I understand this does cause issues if you are opening a project where the home folder is on a shared drive, because that's supported. But notebooks live as a separate file, not inside of the APRX. So yeah, that's just a current limitation. We made sure that there were friendly error messages in Pro that just straight up state you can't have a notebook exist on a shared location like that. You can use the catalog pane to copy Ipnb files. So if you see a notebook on a shared location that you have a folder connection to, you can take that pretty quickly, and just right-click, copy, and paste into a letter drive location. Also, I think that's in our frequently asked questions on the blog, which states that you can do a link. You can sort of create a letter drive for a shared folder as a workaround.
Interesting.
Yeah, but that's more of a technical option.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do need to make sure that, yeah, UNC path, we recommend creating a symbolic link or mapping the UNC path to a drive, which we have a technical support article about.
Makes sense. We just had one question rise up to the next slide, which is it possible to schedule a notebook in ArcGIS online? And I can give a quick answer, and Annie, please add where possible. But yes, my understanding is that you can schedule notebooks in ArcGIS online. They added that feature not too long ago. Yeah, that's a short answer, and you can take a look at some of the workshops that they've run, I think, for additional details. I know it's progressed quite a bit recently.
Yeah. If you're using notebooks in online, do keep in mind that Pro only runs the notebooks locally. So even if you were to go into the portal tab of the catalog pane and download a hosted notebook, like from ArcGIS Online, it's only going to run locally. So any data resources that requires, you need to have access to that on that machine. This goes back to that. One of our first interesting questions there was about sharing from Pro to online. Same goes with consuming from online to Pro. You might have hard-coded data paths or network resources that are not always available. So you run into some errors if you're not careful.
Yeah.
Yeah, just an aside.
It's good to know. The next one is compliment. So thank you, whoever you are. Thanks, Alberto and Danny, for the Q&A. You're very welcome. Thank you for the questions. The next one, I usually write large geoprocessing and or file management and or multi-step automation Python scripts that I often add to a script tool in ArcMap, and I'm now starting in ArcGIS Pro. I usually write my scripts in PyScripter, I'm sorry, or Eclipse. What would be the reasons I might consider using notebooks instead?
Hey, yeah, you're right. This is Dev Summit. A lot of the people listening are technical or the power users in their organization. We're saying large geoprocessing, file management, multi-step automation. Yeah, so you're technical, you're high level, you know what you're doing in Python. Short answer, you don't need to switch to notebooks if you don't want to. But you're saying what reason, you want us to sell it. And the first thing that comes to mind is like the markdown cells are rich comments. Alberto and I have discussed this a bit. So much value in including a GIF that shows what the next cell does. Collapsible headings, it makes your code super readable and consumable by others. If the person who asks this question is used to like sharing an automation Python script by making a web service, like a web tool or a geoprocessing service, and the consumers just use it by filling in parameters, those users aren't going to be really interested in your notebooks. But another developer might be really interested in seeing exactly how you did it, the source code, and running it cell by cell and taking a look line by line. So if you go to the trouble of converting that to a notebook with rich markdown and like explanatory comments and modularizing it so that it makes sense step by step and cell by cell, that can be really huge in explaining what you did to someone else in your organization who also is kind of on your level with Python. Yeah, at Esri, we share notebooks all the time. super convenient, and it's easy to tell what somebody did, like reproduce a problem or demonstrate a new workflow idea, prototyping together with other people. You might just want to share a notebook across, but you're not in your IDE. Some IDEs support notebooks. I would check out Visual Studio Code, very rich support for notebooks. That's why we added them to Pro, is because some people want to use the Python window like an IDE. They want to use their existing data in projects. All they code notebook. So don't stop.
I don't know if anyone needs to use PyScripter though.
You're just a PyScripter hater.
It might be better served by Notepad at that point. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Upgrade to idle, huh?
Yeah. All right. No, that's a great answer. Agreed fully. When working on a network folder with a UNC path, do you still have to use a folder shortcut generated by MK create a notebook, or is there a better option? And we touched on this earlier, but is there anything you want to add to that?
That's the option. Otherwise, migrate over to a named letter drive on your machine.
Yeah.
But if you're sharing like an APRX on a network drive and multiple users need to get at it, sometimes when you open it up that it says read only on it because somebody else is accessing it. A notebook is not going to be like write protected like a file geodatabase or anything. So do be careful with that. If you change the Ipnb file somehow, the other users are just their work would be clobbered. So yeah, best practice would be to just use your C drive, share a package on that. Yeah, I demonstrated that. Share a package on the network drive instead. And then when you unpack it, it goes to your C drive. And then you can edit that notebook and share the package again. Version control in notebooks is a whole can of worms.
A whole workshop.
Yeah, different video.
Yeah.
Different session for sure.
Maybe for a future conference. And I also like the verb clobbered for I clobbered your work by mistake. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it makes it sound extra dramatic.
Yeah. I noticed prior question was about notebook replacing PyScripter, etc. And someone commented that PyCharm also supports notebooks. And that's a good point. Although I think you need the professional edition. I think you have to pay some money to get to that point, right?
Oh yeah. I only use PyCharm Community free edition. I recommend everybody check out Visual Studio Code for notebooks. They kind of did their own thing, where in ArcGIS Pro and in your browser, the interfaces are exactly the same. Visual Studio Code sort of wrote their own notebook interface from scratch, so it's pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, we'll have to check that out. We have time for a few more questions. We actually have a ton of dialogue, so thank you everyone for submitting questions.
Thanks for contributing to the conversation.
Yeah. Which Python environment is used in ArcGIS Online, and can I customize packages perhaps? Is that managed at an organizational level?
I'm not an expert on the hosted notebooks. I know there are multiple runtimes. There's a basic and a standard and an advanced, and the advanced has ArcPy. But they both, I think, have the same common scientific libraries. Alberto, do you know about installing custom modules there?
Yeah, you can. My understanding is that you can customize it at the organizational level, but you would have to get into the admin API, or you would have to do some work behind the scenes as an administrator to make it so that the Docker image basically includes that Python package that you need everyone to have. And my understanding is that's possible. The other thing you could do is within a a hosted notebook that's running, I think you can do conda install as well, using the magic commands like we talked about before. So magic commands seems to be the magic answer for everything.
For more on that, you can head over to the Ask Our Experts Python channel.
Yeah, we haven't mentioned that perhaps yet, and that's typically the best answer.
Right, for anything. So yeah, we'll do the best we can here, but head over and ask the experts.
Yeah, the actual experts. Can you import ArcGIS in serverless environments such as AWS Lambda? Also, do you have Docker container with ArcGIS API? Question by Shingo.
Import ArcGIS. So you're talking about the ArcGIS Python API.
Yeah. And my understanding is yes, right? You don't, I mean, you can have the Python API installed locally.
Anywhere Python is installed.
That's a quick answer. Just take a look at the doc and you can try it locally.
If you have specific questions, ask the experts.
Yep. All right, question by Anonymous. We have maybe about 4 minutes left. Can you export your notebook as a WPRD, a PDF, an HTML document to share your processing workflow with non-pro users and for technical documentation? And Danny, maybe you start to answer that.
Yes. We did just add, I believe at 2.7, an export option in Pro, and you can choose Python file or HTML file. Forgive me if that was actually 2.8.
I saw it recently, but I wasn't sure which version it came out in for Pro.
Works on my machine. That's great question. Another powerful thing notebooks can do is switch formats. So you could export it as a .py file for somebody to just run all the code. You can export it HTML so that they can see all of your markdown and rich output as you went through your workflow. And that's exactly what it's for, to document and share your workflow with non-pro users and technical documentation. Totally. Export it out to HTML. If you can't do that in ArcGIS Pro because you're not on the latest, beta version that I'm on, you can do that from the command line using Ipnb convert, I think is the module and the command. That's covered in our frequently asked questions on the blog that we'll link to.
I'm not familiar with WPRD, actually. Have you come across that?
Oh, no. Is that one of the ones that normal Jupyter notebooks can export out to?
I don't know.
Maybe they meant Word, maybe.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, I was thinking maybe it's a new format.
We didn't include docx or anything. We included by default HTML and Python because those would be the most common other formats.
Yeah.
Because your notebook is already an Ipnb file, which is a pretty flexible format. And HTML is pretty good because anybody can just double click on it and see all the code in a nice format. And .py is standard also. So choice is yours. Yeah.
Yeah, at that point you have quite a few options.
Yeah.
And we have time for maybe one more question. And that will be, can you use notebooks to create script tools? And I'll take a stab at it first. Yes, however, it's not a completely seamless process. And the reason I answer yes so adamantly is because we use notebooks to test a lot of things ahead of creating our own geoprocessing tools. We prototype a lot of workflows in a notebook and talk with others in our teams about the workflow that we're testing. We talk about how outputs will be perceived, what type of parameters, and notebooks are pretty useful to do that. However, if you want to take a notebook with its markdown and with its maybe nonlinear logic and convert it to a script tool, you will have to do a little bit of work to fit the script template, right? There's an expectation in script tools about how to declare your tool, your toolbox, your parameters, and so on. So there's no completely seamless transition. I think at that point, if your role is to be a developer, that's where you come in and develop, right? And make a script tool.
Yeah,
But I
the
think Notebook,
key,
yeah,
sorry, keyword there, parameters, input and output is not standardized for a notebook. You could make a
yeah,
notebook that outputs other notebooks or text files or edits on a file geodatabase or an enterprise one. Script tools, however, have defined input and output parameter types. So notebooks are not geoprocessing tools, and geoprocessing tools are not notebooks. But yeah, they're both Python, so you can do it. That's always sort of a tricky question.
yeah.
This question starts with, can you, and then do whatever in Python? The answer is usually, well, it's possible, but like anything's possible. Are we asking how? Because then that gets tricky, and maybe we should have a private conversation to get into more detail.
Then we ask the experts. All right, I think we're just about out of time now. So if you have more questions, ask the experts at our Ask the Experts section at the top of your conference ribbon.
We'll be there.
Yep, we'll join and learn with you. So thank you so much for the time and for all the questions. If we didn't get a chance to answer your question during this Q&A session, just feel free to reach out to us independently. Please fill out the course survey underneath. I think it's right under this video. And let us know how we did so that we can continue improving the sessions. And good luck. Enjoy the conference. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.